avoid kickback, we're going to have you muted. Erin, if you can right now, just make sure everyone is muted, please. And if you want to comment, just click unmute down on the bottom toolbar there, or like we learned today from Linda this morning, you can press your space bar. Our main focus for this group is to build some community within our region, and give you short, sweet little tidbits as you start continuing and growing as an online educator. This is all new for many of us, so we are trying to build the community. One way to do that is to have your face visible. If you are not comfortable, or if you do not have the bandwidth or the internet access to allow you to put your face, that is okay. We completely understand. We also do want to give you the disclaimer that these are to be recorded, and then we will make them available at our website, which we'll show you at the end of the session here. Today's format for the presentation, it'll be a quick, short, sweet, to the point presentation for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will do a question and answer session at the end. And at the conclusion of the webinar, we will send a feedback form link to you. Please respond to that link, even if you did it this morning or in other sessions, because it will give us some data on how this session went, and if you want to have any comments or suggestions moving forward. Not to mention, it is a way for us to account for your attendance in case one of your administrators might say, hey, we're throwing this as an option, that they attend these, and then we can give them a roster for who attended. So we'll give you that in the afternoon, or I'm sorry, at the end of the, my mind's spinning, at the end of the session. Are there any questions before I hand it over to Scott? If you have never used Zoom before, sorry, that was awful wait time, but if you've never used Zoom before, at the bottom is toolbar, there is the mute button. So there's a chat feature. If you have any questions and you'd like to ask them in the back channel and put it out there, please feel free to do so. Again, one of our main goals is to build community, so we're all here to support one another. Now I'll have better wait time. Does anyone have a question? All right, well, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Scott Ringkamp to talk to us about different ways to support our students as online learners.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm not muted, am I? No.
Nope, you're great.
Great. So yeah, this afternoon we're going to talk about supporting learners in an online environment. And as Becky mentioned, my doctorate work is in the realm of online learning, specifically looking at LMS systems is what I'm trying to focus on in that study, and how to support students when they're using a platform online or any kind of online learning is a focus. And it is very different than probably most of your experience of being a classroom teacher. So we're going to kind of dive right in just to what it looks like to support learners online. And it's really broken into three, I'm going to say, systems of support, and they kind of all work together. They're, you know, they're all related, interrelated, but we can really break it down into three categories. The first category, and this is probably the most frustrating category up front, as many people know, is the technical category. And you know, dealing with technology, anything can go wrong, and it will. Usually is the case. So that's category number one. Second is a category that we call human resources or human resources support, and what that really means is people. So what people are involved in the supporting of your students. Sure, the teacher is involved, the student, but there's other people that can also be worked into that whole process to make sure that your students are being supported as much as possible. And we're going to look at some of them as well. The third category is institutional support, and that refers really to the institution, the school district as an institution, and what support mechanisms are in place institutionally that will help ensure your students' success. And I'll explain that more when we get there, at least of what that means. So just diving right in, well, almost diving right in, I guess, kind of around all of those things in the online world is the idea of communication. And every one of these systems of support is affected by communication because you're not with your students anymore. You're not having that face-to-face interaction every day or every other day or anything like that. And so to find out about technical problems or any other supports that they need, you have to have good communication. And that's probably the number one skill that is needed to work in an online environment with students. Uh, so taking a little bit of a deeper look here, we're going to start with technical support, and this refers specifically to the technical aspects of online learning. And in our day and age, that the internet is probably the number one biggest problem, especially with our more rural students in rural areas, due to the lack of broadband access or even cell phone access, and or the common problem is that when you have more than one person in the house doing something online, it falls apart. You know, if someone's watching video in one room and trying to do learning in the other, both connections are going to be slowed down immensely. Um, on top of that, then you have the device. What are they using to access their online learning? A couple of years ago, it was a big deal because you had iPads and you had Flash technology, and they weren't interchangeable. These days, everything is thankfully interchangeable on any kind of device. But is the device working as intended, or is there something going wrong? A great example of this would be, let's say the learner is supposed to go out and click on a link and do something, and then it gets blocked by the school's internet filter by mistake. And maybe the teacher tested it and it wasn't blocked on the teacher network, and then but the student is more restrictive, and those can be frustration points for your students. Um, Software is another thing, and this is something we run into all the time. What if you want your kids to work with PDFs? But Adobe PDF Acrobat Reader is not pre-installed on the computer, and you're trusting your user base, your parents and students, to understand enough to install something themselves on their computer so they can access these PDFs. And then finally, access, technical support, and just what are you doing for kids who are English language learners or who have visual disability for like videos? Are you providing transcripts and making sure all of your materials that are online are accessible? And that can be a very technical problem that needs to be solved uh, before you disseminate lots of information and or activities. So just some kind of toolbox ideas to address these technical things, and I'm going to do this for each section, is give you kind of an overview of the problems and then some things you can do to mitigate them, especially in this very short turnaround piece. For technical support, the number one thing you can do for your students is have a very clear way for them to get help. Whether that is a support phone number that they can call specifically to receive help on accessing course materials or enrichment materials. And even if all you're doing, let's say your district is just doing enrichment and support, and they're accessing activities in a Google Drive or something like that, you want to make sure that they have a direct way of accessing support if they click on it and, let's say, a Google Drive resources and shared correctly or something like that. You want to get feedback as fast as possible on things like that are wrong, so you can get them fixed. Um, and whether that is through like a specific help desk at your school, maybe you already have set up, or if the teacher is going to be that point of contact for each of class and their materials, it's something you want to think through and provide to the student along with the materials. It kind of ropes into the second for support contacts. If you are giving like devices to your students or assisting with internet connectivity or something like that, not only do you want to have somebody who can help with the curriculum access pieces, but what do they do if like they run their laptop over with a car in the parking lot, which you would think would be abnormal, but it's happened multiple times to students who through Equip we have given laptops to. So it's more common than you think that things like that would happen. And then the last technical support piece, especially in the beginning, is proactive checkups. You never want to assume that your students, if you don't hear from them, that they are being able to access the content that you've given them. If it's however that it has been given to them. You want to have some kind of plan in place to make proactive checkups, especially in the first couple of weeks, to make sure that they are being successful. The last thing you want is, you're sending materials home or providing access to stuff for like 6 weeks, and then you find out that they haven't, on the first day they tried to click on it, didn't work, and they gave up for the last 6 weeks, which is a very common response, especially if they're not motivated to do the work in the first place. So the next section of support is institutional support. And the biggest piece for this is, how are you as a district providing necessary information to your students now that they are home or not in your building? And this could be even like announcements, like upcoming events that aren't canceled, like graduation. How are you communicating to your seniors what you're doing with graduation once you figure out how that's going to look? How are you providing updates to your student body, and how are you making sure all students are getting those updates? Maybe you're posting on social media, but what about students that don't have social media? So how are you thinking through getting that information to them? Or it could be things like access information. Let's say you're using Study Island or something like that, and a lot of these companies are opening up to all their students in schools to be able to use. So maybe new students who have never used Study Island before, how are you getting them the information they need to access that? And then along with that, how are you essentially training them in how to access that platform? Like, if you just send the username password home, are they going to be successful with that? The second piece in institutional support is looking at learning deficiencies. And you're going to have different ones pop out when you're dealing with online learners. Those learners who are good in the classroom are not necessarily going to be as proficient at learning online. And it might bring forward even some specific learning disabilities that you didn't know
Welcome back.
about. Things like maybe they have a slight dyslexia problem or something like that, and that is going to be highlighted or more evident when they're reading a lot of content in an online environment rather than getting all their content from the teacher themselves. So how are you going about identifying those with online learners, and then what are you doing to address those kind of things? And then finally, curriculum. Is your curriculum accessible? Is it engaging? Are the things that you're providing for your students to do, are they created in such a way that the kids are going to want to do them, or be motivated to work on them? And that's something you can address all the way down to like paper and pencil packets. Is it like a straight 40-page worksheet of math problems, or is there some way you can develop that better to more engage the kids? And what kind of support can you provide with that? So I kind of talked about the first two here as I went over the last slide, but the last institutional support piece here is how are the students able to access the same supports that they had while they were in the building? Um, let's say that you have your juniors and seniors or sophomores, and they are looking to go to college next fall. How are you ensuring that they still have the guidance support they need, or career readiness support, um, and scheduling for next year, thinking about things like that? Are your students, especially in an extended absence, let's say we end up closing for the rest of the year, how are they able to access the guidance counselor support and resources in that way? And the same with like principals and other supervisors. Let's say that something comes up just like it would in the classroom. Did they know, first off, did they know how to access those leadership in the building? Um, and are they accessible to your students? Um, and the last thing is our human resource support. And outside of the specific positions I just talked about, um, do the students have support in place from the people around them? And this specifically refers to the teacher, is probably one of the biggest ones here. Um, are you as a teacher making yourself accessible to your students, and how are you going about doing that? And we'll talk about that in just a second here. And then how are family and friends supporting your learners as they are learning online? And what are you doing as a district to prepare families for what the students are supposed to be doing over the next couple weeks? Um, and along with that, how are you helping families prepare the household so that students will have a time to be successful and a place to be successful in their house? The research shows that kids who have a set schedule at home for online learning and a set location, just like as if they were in the building, are vastly more successful than the kids who are just allowed to do laissez-faire whenever they want to, and there's no structure or schedule in place. So are you providing any resources to families to help them set up a environment in the home for the kids to be successful? So to kind of touch back on that, we did the home environment, but also throughout this process, are you involving students with other students in any way? Especially if you're going to have some kind of continuity of education where you are doing instruction. Uh, how are you making sure your students aren't feeling isolated and on an island all by themselves when it relates to the rest of their class? And how can you involve the whole class in the activities that you are doing, and even do things like maybe virtual field trips or virtual Zoom meetings that are maybe not required, but they're touch points where you can meet with everybody, and the kids can talk to each other as well and not feel isolated just in their home. Um, and then yeah, teacher communication and touches. And touches is a word from like the sales world, but how are you essentially touching your students on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, and what forms of communication is that taking? If all you're doing is emailing your students every day, that's not going to be an effective form of communication. Um, and as we go through our webinar series, we're going to be looking at other ways to communicate. We're going to look at like screencasting, ways to make video for your students to watch. We're going to look at Zoom and how you could do synchronous meetings like this with your kids. Um, just some great ideas that are out there. That are helpful for teachers, especially is to function more like a college and create, let's say, online office hours, so that your students have a focused time that they know they can reach you each week, and that they could log into a Zoom and ask you questions and talk to you, maybe talk to some other students and stuff like that. So really thinking through those things. And just kind of the last little piece here, just these are kind of three questions that I think you should ask as you are thinking through how are you supporting your students in an online environment. Question number one is, what do my students need to be successful? And that could refer to technology. What technology do they need? What access do they need to online platforms? What supports do they need academically? Do they need like text to speech or translation tools or pieces like that? The second question is, who should my students have access to? They certainly need access to the teacher, but do they need access to any of the other staff at your school? Do they need access to a learning coach or a paraprofessional or an aide that they had in the school as well, who could be assisting them? And then the last and the third big question that I think every teacher needs to develop a consistent plan is, how am I going to consistently communicate with my students? And honestly, the best way to do this is to come up with a template for your week and apply it to all your students on a consistent basis. Maybe it looks like on Monday you send out an update email. On Tuesday, you hold a live Zoom session for anybody to attend who's available. On Wednesday, you do a video recording. On Thursday, maybe you do chat. On Friday, you do phone calls home. And I don't know what it's going to look like. It certainly depends on your situation and if you're doing full instruction or just engagement and enrichment activities. Um, but it's essential to have something consistently in place, because uh, just based off of the research, that is the number one reason students are successful in online learning, is that somebody at the school, whether it's their teacher or a learning coach, is taking the time to consistently communicate and check in with them and make sure that they're being successful, not having any problems. So yeah, those are kind of the things we have to think about. And I guess we're going to open it up to questions now, and or any other input from my co-presenters Becky and Aaron. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Becky, if you've been looking at the questions and.
Yeah, I thought, that was great. Scott, I really appreciate the communication piece. I know when I was in the classroom, someone gave me the tip of just like close your door, sit up and think about all the protocols and all the procedures you want in place if you were a student. And I think it's important we all have empathized with educators and we understand what we're going through, but to really empathize with students and parents as well. And I think the more you communicate with them, have consistency, and have understanding that it's not going to be a synchronous platform anymore, and really think about like, what are your expectations? Because it's new for the students. I think that's really important. So I'm glad you brought that up. Erin also is on our team here for the Online Learning Hub. She is our elementary focus. And Erin, do you want to jump on and say a couple of comments here?
Yeah, the one thing, Scott, I really love this questions to ask yourself slide that we're looking at right now. I think it's important for all educators to think about, I feel like we're all feeling very isolated for lots of reasons right now, but that last, the middle question there, who should my students have access to? It's really easy if you come join us, I think it's tomorrow afternoon for the Zoom, even if you're familiar with Zoom, it's an easy way to make co-presenters similar to the way Scott and Rebecca and I are doing it today, and to try to plan where you're giving your students the support other than just the classroom teacher, where your special ed teacher is on, or maybe anybody else that they're used to and they're familiar with. Another educator said something really powerful to me this week. Using tools that they're familiar with right now is helpful instead of throwing all these new things at them, starting with something that they're familiar with, right, Megan? It's helpful. So I think that is something to consider when you're thinking about your planning. Who should my students have access to? Maybe not just their regular ed teacher. So that's something that I took away from that.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions right now? We have about 5-6 minutes, and I mean, we'll stay on a little bit, but does anyone have any questions for the whole group? Again, it's not just us answering. Anyone can feel free to answer. Has anyone started this process of online learning with students? All right. Any ideas for maybe how you might communicate with them?
Hi guys, this is Marcy. I am not in your IU. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So I have students that do not check my Schoology platform. They're not doing, any, communication with the team. I teach 5th grade in Ephrata, and we started like trying to connect. We did a Zoom video with the team. We tried, we're putting little fun things out. I've made phone calls, and I have like 6 or 7 kiddos whose parents aren't answering the phone. There's nothing going on the Schoology platform. What would you suggest as I move forward? I'm going to call again, and we're doing another Zoom on Friday. So what would you suggest I try next?
So as far as the communication with families go, the best way to get an answer is to really just be persistent in that. And it can sometimes help, even though you'd be like, why? I wonder why, but it can help if you have somebody else try to. So if it's something that you really want to get in touch with them, if maybe your principal could help you with that, and they might be more responsive to giving an answer to them or to contacting them. So.
And I think right now, as we're in the spotlight as educators with legalities, I think keeping the tracking and making sure you're showing the effort.
Yes.
I think people know and logging that you're making the attempt. I think that's really important. And that's what we're getting from the state as well. We know that unfortunately, there's going to be some cracks, and that's going to be hard when, especially if districts are doing the enrichment and enhancement option and the skill-based learning, there's no grades attached. So we think about, it was hard to motivate kids when they were just in front of us in the classroom. How am I going to motivate them when it's not really graded? We are really going to have to think creatively. But I would really suggest making sure you continue, like Scott said, and then make sure you're tracking that, because the attempt is what's really important.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. I have to go.
Thank you.
I see. There's a question from Amy about districts that do not have teachers able to connect. So are you? I assume that means like the teachers themselves don't have internet at home, and are are unable to connect. And if that is the case, if they still have a phone signal and they can do outgoing phone calls, it'd be a great opportunity to partner with a teacher in the grade group or in the department if it's at a high school level, to really almost like co-teach in a sense with them, or co-present, have somebody who does have the access being the person sending it all out, and then have the person without the ability to connect still involved in the process as much as possible. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas on that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And Todd Moyer, another person on our staff at the IU, and he's on the call, but he has some connectivity issues sometimes. But he suggested too, you know, we also have to think outside the box, like I said this morning, and not just think about the only way I can connect with them is virtually. Picking up the phone and calling is still an option. Sending a postcard, but it might take a while right now to get that. But keeping that in mind, there's other ways to connect is important too. And I know some of the districts are discussing that, like what about teachers that can't connect, and they're already thinking about some ways, hopefully. So there, Tara, yep. Awesome. Any other questions that we have going through here? All right. So we want to thank you today for being on our webinar. Scott, do you want to pull up the website for how to access it? So we're going to show you how to access our website. We'll give you some links here.
All right.
Go ahead, Scott.
So if you just go to our homepage, iu17.org, under professional learning, there's the online learning hub right there. And that will get you to our website here. A few things on here. You'll see the lineup of classes upcoming below. Right here is a link to suggest any content areas you're looking for or would be interested in the future. So we encourage you to fill that out as well. We have sessions Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday is a coffee and conversation, which is an open session that we're just going to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. And I just want to point out that Becky just pointed in the chat free links. The first link is a feedback form from today. So please fill that out and give us feedback on the content and how you think we did. You can also provide your PPID if at some future point your district wants to award PD hours for these. Although nobody, it's not, that's a district by district thing. So, but yeah, fill those out. And Becky, do you have anything else to say before we close up?
Yeah, the webinar website's right there. If you just want to click on those to open them up and save them. Tomorrow morning we'll be back up at 9 o'clock. And how do we keep our content through this online learning? And last but not least, I'm going to throw our emails in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. So thanks for spending your half an hour of the afternoon with us, and basically